Hi, welcome to Mormon Scripture Explorations. This year I'm working my way through the Book of Mormon, and we'll be doing occasional videos and some other things related to that, trying to parallel the LDS annual scripture study schedule. And I'll try to be doing these a couple weeks before the lessons are scheduled throughout the year, so this material will be available if anybody wants to take a look in relationship to the annual schedule. Today I'm going to take a look at the witnesses to the golden plates. If you look at the introductory material in the current 1981 edition of the Book of Mormon, the material for the three witnesses, the testimony of the 3 and 8 witnesses, rather, can be found on page 4 of the introductory material. In the original edition of the Book of Mormon, which I've indicate here by the abbreviation BMFE, which means the Book of Mormon First Edition or the Book of Mormon Facsimile Edition, because you can buy it in facsimile form. It has no versification, so you give page number references. Anyway, in the original edition, it's at the end of the Book of Mormon. In our contemporary editions, it's on page 4 of the introductory material. Now, basically, there's, I think, a spiritual symbolism going on here when we look at the witnesses. There are, in fact, 12 witnesses to the golden plates, paralleling, I think, intentionally the 12 apostolic witnesses of Jesus' resurrection. We usually talk about 11 witnesses, 3 who saw the plates and an angel, and 8 who saw only the plates, but Joseph Smith was also one of these witnesses, so you end up with 12 total. And I think that was intentional on the part of Joseph. Now, when we look at the fact that there were people who claimed to be witnesses of the Book of Mormon, or of the Golden Plates, rather, this is a very interesting thing because it's rather unique in the history of sacred documents and scripture throughout the world. Generally speaking, religious books don't have independent witnesses attesting to their divine origin and authenticity. That is to say, generally speaking, an angel doesn't appear to people and say, this is an authentic book, this is an actual revelation, and now write this down and, have a testimony appended to the document. It's much more complicated when you get into the Bible, but lots of different books have claimed to be scripture throughout history, and very few, if any of them, have eyewitnesses who attest to have seen an angel and to seen other evidence of divine authenticity. For example, if you look at the Quran, I've listed some verses there. The people of Mecca, the Quraysh tribe, repeatedly demand that Muhammad bring an angel to testify to them, to authenticate and verify that his revelations in the Quran are authentically from God. The Quran repeatedly refuses to do so. I've listed the verses there. It just basically says, you're not going to get this type of witness. So it's very interesting that the people of Mecca wanted that testimony, precisely the testimony that we have of the Book of Mormon, but Muhammad was unable to produce it. If you look at Swedenborg, for example, another visionary man who wrote books based on his visions of heaven and other things, we don't have anybody that I know of that says, well, an angel came to me and showed me a heavenly book, that Swedenborg got his information from, or the angel said, oh, yes, Swedenborg is a true prophet. Nothing like that. You have the case of Madame Blavatsky, who is a late 19th century occultist and spiritualist, and she claims to have received a bunch of letters from the person they called the Mahatma, the great soul in Sanskrit, and she claims to have received these letters from a real person, the Mahatma, who's one of these ascended masters, they call them. Anyway, she has these letters, she produces the letters, but they're just a piece of paper with writing on them. And she says, I got them from this person, but nobody other than Madame Blavatsky ever met the Mahatma. And there's no verification that these letters were by this Mahatma other than Madame Blavatsky says that's the case. Aleister Crowley, an infamous a notorious magician of the early 19th century, claimed to have had a revelation of a book from Horus. And again, no, we have a book that he produced. He says Horus dictated this book to me, but we have no. It's his book of the law. We have no. No angels appeared to people and said, yes, in fact, this is from Horus. Horus did not appear to someone else and say, yes, this is my book. We just have Crowley claiming this. So the point of this is that there are many books of claimed scripture, and few of them have this type of authenticating witnesses that support them. Now, the other thing we need to think about is that there are practical difficulties of trying to fabricate this type of testimony. Suppose Joseph Smith is faking the whole thing. He's got to get 12 people or 11 people to testify of these things and never deny or modify their testimony. Now those practical difficulties are minimized or ignored by most critics. They just ignore the issue, and for good reason. It's very difficult to come up with a coherent explanation of this. So when we look at the witnesses, we have two batches who had witnessed two different events. The first are the three witnesses who saw an angel and heard the voice of the Lord. And you can read these testimonies in the Book of Mormon. I'm not going to read them here, but go take a look at them, read through them, and notice that they claim to have seen an angel. So there's a visionary aspect to this. They heard a voice of the Lord. There's an auditory aspect. And then they saw and touched the golden plates. So there is also a tactile aspect to this. You're having, if these were delusions or something, it's very difficult to try to understand how this happened, that all three people had the same delusion. They testified that the angel told them, and the voice told them that the plates are from God and were translated by the power of God. And that's pretty remarkable. It's interesting that three of the witnesses had this angelic experience, but 8 of them don't. The next batch, the 8 witnesses, claim no supernatural event involved with what they saw. And they're very specific in expressing this. They saw the golden plates, they held them in their hands, they turned the leaves, and they saw the engravings that were on the plates. And their testimony is that Joseph Smith really did have these plates. Now, that's the essence of these witnesses. All of this begs the question, of course, why didn't God produce the plates and let everybody see them? And that's a good question for which we don't have any answer other than for whatever reason God didn't want to do that. Most people think it's because he wants the Book of Mormon to be a test of faith, that type of thing. But for whatever reasons, we don't have the plates now, but we do have these testimonies of the plates. So it's an interesting conundrum. It's a lot of evidence, but it's not quite enough to force everyone to be convinced, but it's enough evidence to kind of force you to take it seriously, at least to examine it. We're kind of left at that level where we're balancing between belief and unbelief in the Book of Mormon. Now, how do we explain what's going on here? If you're a believer, you simply say the witnesses described exactly what they saw and heard, that these are accurate, authentic descriptions of what they saw. If you're an unbeliever, if you don't believe Joseph Smith had golden plates, and if you reject the authenticity of the Book of Mormon, then you've got to come up with some explanation for these witnesses. And generally speaking, the critics simply dismiss the claims of the witnesses without any analysis. They just simply say, the story is completely preposterous. There's no reason to believe this. However, for whatever reason and why ever and however they made these testimonies, they're bogus. And they don't feel any need to explain it. This is humorously reflected in Mark Twain's comment. When he read through the Book of Mormon, he made all sorts of comments about it, very amusing stuff. And he talks about the witnesses of the plates, of the 8 witnesses, I believe 3 were from the Whitmer family. Possibly 4. Maybe I'll just check it. I've got my Book of Mormon here. One of the, where are the witnesses? 4 Whitmers, Christian, Jacob, Peter, and John. So Mark Twain says, I could not feel more satisfied and at rest if the entire Whitmer family had testified of seeing the gold plates. So that's a pretty good comment, right? I mean, all these Whitners testifying this. So, he's mocking it. And that's considered enough. Just dismiss it. On the other hand, if you want to try to engage and explain Joseph Smith and his prophetic claims as a whole, you've got to make a coherent explanation for this. There's three possible models of explanation for Joseph Smith. One is that he's an authentic prophet. The second is that he truly believed his prophetic claims but was delusional. He was having hallucinations or whatever. And the third is that he knew he was not a prophet and he was consciously trying to defraud people, that he was lying. Now, your explanation of Joseph Smith will fit broadly into one of these three models. Of course, there's overlap and different issues, but, broadly speaking, those are the three possible explanations. The first, then, if Joseph Smith is an authentic prophet, the testimony of the witnesses are just straightforward, basically true testimonies of what they saw and heard. They are coherent and consistent in this regard. So it's pretty straightforward if he's an authentic prophet. However, once you move into the question of him being not authentic, that is either deluded or fraudulent, how do you explain it? Well, if he's sincere but deluded, then he's having delusions about golden plates. He's having hallucinations or something. If Joseph is having these hallucinations, what plates did the 8 witnesses see? So let's assume Joseph Smith was hallucinating, thought he had golden plates. He gets 8 people. He says, look here. Here's these golden plates I have. And he holds out his hand, and there's nothing there. Right? Now, if he is hallucinating about plates, he's not going to make fake plates because he really believes they're there. But if he doesn't have any plates and just, shows an empty box, what do the witnesses see? He can't forge plates because he believes they're real. And if they didn't see anything, why would they lie about it? They'd say, well, Joseph, you're kind of crazy. There's nothing in this box. Now, what if he's delusional about seeing an angel? The 3 witnesses come to him. He says to them, okay, guys, come here. We're going to see an angel. Joseph Smith thinks he sees an angel. He hallucinates about it. And what do the other 3 witnesses see? Biologically, it's impossible for 2 people to have the same delusion. That is to say, a hallucination derives from aberrant brain chemistry. I guess people could kind of accept someone else's hallucination and delusion, but in fact, there's something wrong if Joseph hallucinates of seeing an angel and the witnesses didn't see an angel because it wasn't there. It creates a significant inconsistency. And it's interesting in this regard that Martin Harris, in fact, initially, Joseph and Oliver Cowdery and David Whitmer saw the angel in the plates, but Martin Harris didn't. And then later on, he's able to have the vision. The vision is replicated, and he sees the angel in plates as well, and so can testify with the other 3, Joseph, Cowdery, and Whitmer. So the fact that Martin Harris at first said he didn't see it and then later did have the same vision is very interesting, because if they're lying, if the 3 witnesses are lying, they just say, yeah, we saw it. So obviously David Whitmer's not lying because he tries and doesn't see it and then later does see it. So it's a very interesting set of problems. Now, Joseph Smith could have been a fraud. He could have tried to deceive the witnesses. In that case, he'd have to make fake plates. Now, people can tell the difference between metal and wood. They can tell the difference between tin and gold. These plates would be costly and very difficult to make. We don't know that he'd have the skill to make them. Furthermore, how could he fabricate an angelic manifestation? I mean, somebody hides behind a tree and says, this is the Lord, Noah, that type of thing. How's he going to fabricate an angelic manifestation? I mean, dress a guy up in a white robe and have him stand there? This isn't going to fool people. Now, it's possible that the witnesses were collaborators in the fraud. That is, Joseph lied. He convinced the 3 witnesses to lie as well. All right, so let's say that happened. Why then did they never deny their testimony of the Book of Mormon? Now, all of them left the church in one form or another. All of them were alienated from the church. All of them came to see Joseph Smith as a fallen prophet in some way or another. Now, if those three were lying in the first place, why didn't they say that we were deceived by Joseph or something? Why didn't they deny their testimony? They know they're lying. They're alienated from the church and Joseph. They have no reason whatsoever to continue claiming that the Book of Mormon is true if they know it's a lie, if they were collaborators in the fraud. And yet they all maintain their testimony throughout their entire lives. It's really quite remarkable. And furthermore, if everybody's lying, that is, if all the 11 witnesses are lying, why don't they all claim to have seen an angel or God or all sorts of things? They could make up a lie about seeing anything. Why does one group say they only saw the plates and the other group say they saw the angel if they're lying? Why didn't they all see the angel? They could have seen anything they wanted. So there's a lot of problems and inconsistencies once you start to break it down and try to understand what's going on. Now, another interesting thing is about the integrity of the witnesses. The lives of the witnesses and their character has been scrutinized in great detail by a number of Mormon scholars. And I've got a bibliography up on my Mormon Scripture Exploration page, which goes into, and it just lists all the different studies and a lot of the primary sources associated with this. Now, these studies consistently demonstrate the fundamental integrity of the witnesses. That is, that the people that know them and what we know about them shows them to be, number one, just basically honest, decent people. And number two, they're not crazy. They don't go around doing bizarre things that would make them seem crazy to the people that knew them. These studies also demonstrate the undeviating affirmation of their testimony of the golden plates and the divine manifestations. Over and over and over again, the witnesses for whom we have documentation, some of them we don't know much about, but several of them we do, most of them we do, and they consistently, over and over again, affirm their testimony, even when they've left the church and are alienated from Joseph Smith and could have no possible motive for continuing a lie if in fact they were involved with a fraud. So this is a very interesting phenomenon, and historically speaking, it creates a serious problem that critics of the church have to deal with. There's lots of different explanations that have been given for the Book of Mormon and for the career of Joseph Smith and so forth, ranging from he's a complete fraud to he's delusional and so on. However, the critics need to come up with an internally consistent and not contradictory explanation. You can't explain one thing one way and another thing another way and another thing another way. Basically, it's got to be consistent internally in all aspects of Joseph's life, in all the scriptures he produced, in his ministry, in the lives of the witnesses, and so forth. Now, Dan Peterson, a scholar of a BYU professor and great apologist and scholar of Mormon studies, has discussed these issues in great depth, and I highly recommend that you take a look at his articles. They're in the Farms Review. I've given the references there, and the bibliographies and links to the online versions can be found on my bibliography of the witnesses at the Mormon Scripture Explorations page. So I strongly encourage you to read those and try to get a grasp of the issues surrounding an attempt to come up with a consistent and non-contradictory explanation of the Book of Mormon that rejects the authenticity and deals with Joseph Smith as a fraud or deluded person in the production of this. Finally, there's a lot of incidental witnesses of the plates. In addition to the 11 formal witnesses, a lot of people saw the golden plates, or perhaps the plates in a bag or under a cloth or something, in a variety of different circumstances. And an anthology of some of these testimonies can be found in the sources at the end of the bibliography on the witnesses on the Mormon Scripture Exploration page. There's 3 sources which include a lot of the incidental witnesses. For example, Emma saying that I could see the form of the plates underneath a cloth on the table, and I touched it and felt them, and they were there, and I could feel their plates in them. It's not just solid, because you could feel the plates rustling and then kind of vibrating as she touched the edges. Very interesting incidental witness. If she's lying about that, why didn't she just say, yeah, I saw the golden plates on the table? I mean, she could lie. She could say she'd seen anything. And yet she's very careful to say, I didn't see the plates, but I saw something under a cloth which felt they were the shape of plates and felt like they had pages in them. Now, it's a very interesting thing that she said. Why would she make up a lie that way instead of just saying, well, I saw the plate, sure. She could have said anything if she's lying. So, the real explanation for that is she seems to be telling the truth. And what do you make of it? How do you deal with that if you reject the stories of the Mormons? So, it's an interesting historiographical problem, and in my experience, the critics have not successfully engaged this at all.